Hello, I'm an old fart, and I have a guilty pleasure. I like knives. I'm not an expert or an official representative of anything or anybody in any way. I just like knives. And today, as we continue to wander through my collection of small folding pocket knives, we're going to have a look at this beautiful little thing. This is a Lionsteel TiSpine, and I'll give a little background on where this came from. Quite a while ago, I first saw this knife under a different name, the DPX Aculus. I saw it reviewed and a couple of articles on it, and I thought it was a beautiful looking knife, and I was pretty sure I would like to have one, but for me it was basically unattainable. The original deal was that this was designed by DPX. They licensed it to Lionsteel to be manufactured, and the deal was that they could sell it as the DPX off their own website, but nowhere else, and then Lionsteel could manufacture it under a different name and sell it. Well, getting it off the company's website means buying it from the US, and I try to avoid buying directly from US sales because I don't live in the US, and shipping knives across the border is a risky thing. I have about a 50% success rate on knives actually arriving when they cross international borders. So I always try to find a local distributor for anything I'm going to buy. So anyway, the same knife, apparently, is manufactured by Lionsteel and called the TiSpine. That's what this is. Well, then the story got more muddled. The Aculus on the DPX site is no longer identical to this. Now, it's now a flipper, while this is the original thumb hole design. And in fact, the DPX isn't actually listed, or the Aculus isn't actually listed on the DPX site at all anymore. You have to search for it. So. And Lionsteel now lists a model called the Aculus model of the TiSpine. So I don't really know what's going on. I guess the licensing arrangements are changing. So anyway, I found a domestic distributor for this. So this is the Lionsteel version. Ordered one, got it, and it's very pretty indeed. So let's go through it in a little more detail. As I say, apparently it's no longer the same as the DPX Aculus, but in any case, this is the Lionsteel TiSpine, Ti as in titanium. This comes in a variety of anodization colors and finishes. This particular one is the matte finished gray titanium, so it's model number TS1GM. You can imagine G for gray, M for matte, and there are other combinations available. Mechanism. This is a rectangular hole thumb open. So open it with your thumb in the hole like that. So, think of it as it's the same as the Spyderco Spidey hole, except not hideous. Okay. It is an integral frame lock. So traditional frame lock, here, let's see the lock, there's the locking mechanism. However, a little unusually, this whole thing is one solid piece of titanium. There's no separate pieces, no separate locking mechanism, no scales. So integral, solid piece of titanium, which is quite cool. It's running on Teflon washers. Now, it's interesting. I don't think I have another knife that runs on Teflon washers. Seems nice and smooth. Very smooth, or no grit, pleasant feeling. But I don't know much about Teflon washers, and I wonder how they'll age. With a little bit of research, I did find some debate. Everybody seems to agree that Teflon is smoother. I shouldn't say that. Not everyone agrees. Many people think Teflon is smoother. There does seem to be general agreement that bronze wears better over time. I don't think that's a problem for me. This isn't my only knife, and as we'll get to in a moment, it's not really one I carry very often as a user, so I certainly don't anticipate wearing it out in my lifetime. Anyway, with that mechanism, it has a beautiful slow open, very pleasant feeling, a nice secure lock. I can't flick it open. It's just, I can get it moving, but I'm afraid to flick it because it's sharp and there's parts. Now, anytime I say I can't flick a knife open, somebody sends me a TikTok video of themselves flicking it open with their tongue, while balancing on one foot. So maybe others can. I can't. This is a slow, deliberate open knife, and I like that, actually. So no issue there. Size. It's big. It's bigger than I expected, actually. It is a full-sized knife. Fully open, it is 195 millimeters long, which, to use the international scale, is about 1.1 pocket calculators. which is fairly long. Comparing it to other knives, it is way bigger than a mini griptilian. So clearly it is not in the mid-size knife range. It is in the full-size knife range. It is slightly smaller than a large Sabenza and almost the same size as a Benchmade 940. It's about 5 millimeters smaller than the 940, so we'll call it that size. So it's the small end of the large knife scale. The blade is over 3 inches, 3.3 inches, I think. So for places where that matters, this is not going to be a legal knife. Nice blade. The steel is M390, which I think is my favorite steel, a super steel. Holds an edge forever. A little bit of effort in sharpening, but takes a beautiful edge and a beautiful polish. It's an odd blade shape. Technically, they call it a drop point. There's a little bit of drop there, not very much. It's almost a straight back. But it is definitely a long and pointy looking blade, not a traditional drop point. So, an odd drop point, I would call it. And there is a sharpening choil, which I think is important. It helps get right to the edge and sharpen the edge without damaging the shoulder. So I'm always glad to have a sharpening choil. The body, as I said, is integral. That means that there is a main body, including the frame lock. There are no spacers. So that is a solid hunk of titanium, which makes it heavy. It is 100 grams. Now, just by comparison, the mini griptilian is only 70 grams, so it's almost 50% larger, heavier than the mini griptilian. It is lighter than the large Sabenza. Turns out, in fact, it is almost exactly the same as the PM2 in weight. PM2 is 106 grams, so give you an idea. It's a life actually similar in length. But it is, in general, smaller than the PM2, but almost exactly the same weight. And that's because there's a lot of plastic here, and there's a lot of metal here. There is a nice clip. It is let me close that before I hurt myself. It is a stainless steel clip, bent and fit nicely to the knife. As you can see, it's not straight. It has an elegant curve that follows the same line as the curve of the body. I think it's quite an attractive clip. And it is a deep carry clip, which is good news. I like deep carry, so you can see it does allow you to put the knife in all the way. The clip does rest on the lock bar, and with some frame locks, that becomes a problem, that it's adding pressure and making the knife difficult to open. For whatever reason, I don't find that the case with this knife. It opens easily. The clip is held in place by a fancy screw on the end. It's recessed into the end, and there's this fancy sort of 4-lobed screw holding it in place. Now, on some models, I think the Aculus models, that screw is actually a glass breaker, but not here. Here it's just a dome-topped decorative screw. There is a lanyard hole. Final comment, people do ask, is it ambidextrous? I would say no, not at all. You can't move the clip, so it's right-hand carry only. Even though there's a hole in the blade, you can see the locking mechanism is in the way there. There really isn't room on this side to do a left-hand open. At least I can't. And of course, once it's open, frame locks are very much designed to be disengaged with the thumb. So I would say no, not ambidextrous. And it is manufactured in Italy. So for those who need that detail, Italy is not in the United States, but it is a fine manufacturer, and I'll come back to this later. I think it adds a little bit of a sort of exotic feeling to the fact that it's manufactured in the home of Ferrari. So, what do I like about this knife? I like quite a lot about it. I've already said this. I like the slow, smooth open. And when you're opening it slowly and smoothly, you get a nice click, a nice confident, secure lock. The quality of the lock does not depend on you flinging the blade open, as it does with some knives. I like the lines. I like the implied curve of the body, and that the clip and the lock bar all follow that curve. So, plus the 3D texturing of the body. Can you see that that's actually 3D milled into the titanium? It is beautiful to look at. That texturing also adds a very nice grip when holding the knife. It's not just decorative. I like the fact that it's M390, my favorite steel in the blade, and quite a useful blade shape. I'm going to say pros and cons about the blade. So in terms of actually being useful, it is a very useful blade shape. I've used this for some household chores. It is a very good blade to pierce things with, so starting a cut in a bag of grass seed, that kind of thing. Lots of usable blade surface, so it's a good blade for cutting with. Come back to the fact that I think it's a scary looking blade shape, but it is certainly useful. It is a very comfortable knife to cut with. You get a full 4-finger grip, and there are no hot spots. The clip is low enough and simple enough that it isn't providing a hot spot, and the milling gives a good grip, and there's nice subtle thumb jimping there as well. So good, comfortable grip for long cutting. A few things I don't like, and most of them are minor. One is not. A fairly, I think, significant problem is that there is quite noticeable lock stick. Here the knife is open, and when I go to disengage the lock, let me see if I can make you hear this. It's quite a noticeable grating feeling and sound there. It's not a pleasant unlock. The reason is simple. The lock face is the end of the lock bar. It's the cleaned end of that titanium pressing against the blade. There is no hardened insert, as there are on some knives, and there is no ceramic or steel ball, as there is on some knives. It's just the end of this piece of titanium pressing against the back of the blade. I would guess that that's because it's an integral, and with this single piece of milled steel, it would just be a challenge to get in there and do an insert or a ball. So, in any case, it really makes me appreciate the lock smoothness of something like the Sabenza with its ceramic lock ball, which is what's pressing on the blade. So the unlock is completely smooth and there's no grating or friction there. On this knife, there's a resistance to unlocking and then a sound before it lets go. Now, I wonder if that's going to wear with time, because I must be wearing away titanium every time I do that. So it'll probably become looser or smoother with time, but will it also become looser as I start to lose metal there? I don't know. Probably not in my lifetime, so maybe it's not something I should be worried about. Next thing I don't care for, a common problem with some frame locks, is that when I unlock and start to close, my thumb is in harm's way, and nothing is protecting it. There's no flipper tab that acts as a stop there, so boy, I have to remember to get out of the way, or I cut myself. Final thing that I'll say I don't like, we'll come back to this in the ratings in a moment, is I do think the blade is a little bit scary looking. It's long and pointy and stabby looking, and I wish it was a little more subtle. So, speaking of ratings, let's talk about some of those. We'll start with my internationally unknown knife rating system, NTGK, for non-threatening gentleman's knife. We'll do non-threatening first. The good news for non-threatening is the opening. You can open it slowly. In fact, you must open it slowly. And in front of especially nervous people, you can open it with 2 hands. And that really helps to diffuse knife fear. And it does have a very elegant appearance with this starburst pattern in the body. I was going to say scales. They're not scales. And the gentle curves and so on. It has an elegant appearance that I think makes it look more like a work of art and less like a weapon. The bad news for non-threatening is that it is big. That is a large knife compared to something considerably more compact. And as I said, I do think that that is a kind of a scary blade shape. That is a long, very pointy section, and so that will scare some people. So I'd give it, say, a B+ for non-threatening. As a gentleman's knife, there's a lot of good. It's beautiful, and a gentleman's carry things should be beautiful. They should be pocket art. This is certainly pocket art. It's made of exotic materials. premium steel, titanium, so something that you can be proud to have in your pocket and brag about. It is European made in Italy, where Ferrari and Ducati come from. So that's worth some points. And it is a deep carry clip, which I think is important for a gentleman's carry. So it's not bulging out of your knife, it's subtle. Bulging out of your knife, bulging out of your pocket is subtle. The bad news as a gentleman's knife is it is big and it's heavy. Heavy is the particular problem. Sitting in my dress pants, although that sits very nicely flush with the edge of the dress pants, that's 100 grams. That weighs down my pants to quite a noticeable sag in the line of the pants. So it's a little bit heavy. I'd give it an A, but not an A+ as a gentleman's knife. So all told, B+ and an A, I'm going to give it a B+ as a NT/GK. Next rating is the KN rating, which is what will my knife nerd friends think of this knife? Well, they'll like a lot about it. They'll like the steel, M390. They'll like the integral construction. That is really cool. They'll like the appearance. Everybody likes that starburst pattern in the titanium and the sexy curves. They like the manufacturer. Lionsteel is a little bit out of the ordinary and has a good reputation. The bad news is some of them won't like the fact that you can't flick it, because that's important to some of my knife nerd friends. And the lock stick is a real problem. That lock stick is just, well, that's embarrassing, and my knife nerd friends would not like that. That's going to take it away from an A+, but I'll still give it an A as a knife nerd rating. Finally, the CMR, cut myself rating. Well, I have cut myself on this thing a couple of times, learning to manipulate the blade. Closing it to about there and realizing I need to get out of the way, I've cut the knuckle of my thumb. Trying to learn how to open it and discover whether I can flick it or not, I've cut the nail of my pinky. There's the scar still there. So I've cut myself several times on this knife. We'll give it a B as a CMR. And that brings us to the end. A summary. This is a really beautiful knife, and I mean that word literally. It is a beautiful knife to look at. It's a piece of art that I'm very pleased to own. But it is, for me, more of a showpiece. It's a little bit too scary to take to the office. It's a little big and a little pointy. I would take it to a knife collector club to show people. I would display it on my desk or on a bookshelf at home as a work of art. And I do occasionally carry it around the home for cutting with. But it's a little too scary for an everyday carry to a office worker environment. So, beautiful knife, glad to own it. Not an everyday carry. That brings us to the end. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.